I saw the city passing by my window.
Welcome back to Travel Time with Ty. Today, I'm going to reflect on my first time ever cruising, which was in 2019 aboard the Carnival Sensation. And I'm going to reflect on some things that I learned, and pretty much this video could be considered tips for first-time cruisers or some mistakes that you shouldn't make. Okay, let's jump right into it. Tip number one, or mistake number one to avoid, and I'm going to just start with this one right off the bat, and that is knowing your documentation that you need to get on board or not knowing which documentation you need. So what do I mean by that? Some cruise lines, and it is very important and crucial that you look up the policy on your specific cruise line website to know what documentation they require to sail. So some cruises, if they're a closed loop cruise, which I believe that's the terminology that they use, which means that it leaves from the United States and it returns back to the United States. So for example, my cruise in 2019 was a closed loop cruise. We left and sailed from Miami, and we went to Nassau, Grand Turks, Half Moon Cay, and we came back to Miami. For trips like that, they actually don't require you to have a passport on certain cruise lines. And for that, you would pretty much just need your birth certificate and a government issued ID. Now, your birth certificate, it has to be an actual government approved birth certificate from Vital Statistics. It can't be like the little form that you get, you know, from the hospital that has your footprints and things. No, it has to be a birth certificate from Vital Statistics. And the reason why I say that's very important, because that's the last thing you want to do is pay all that money for a cruise and get there and you can't get on board. And they tend to be pretty strict with this. I had two friends that day show up without the proper documentation. Thankfully, Carnival Cruise was feeling in a little, you know, happy mood, I guess, and allowed them to just show pictures of their birth certificate that their family members back home had to send, but I would not count on it. And the other thing that you can use to travel is a passport, a valid United States passport. And with the passport, that's all you need to get on board, is to show that passport. So another tip I would like to say is, I always recommend people to have their passport. I don't recommend traveling with your birth certificate, even if your cruise line allows it. And here's why. You may be able to get on a cruise with the passport, but let's say for some reason, something happens and your cruise is stopping in Mexico and you get stuck in Mexico. Say the cruise leaves you for whatever reason, either y'all were sipping a little too much, something happening, whatever the reason is, you get left in Mexico or overseas somewhere because the cruise ship leaves without you. Now think about it. Now you have to fly home. They're not letting you fly home without a passport. And apparently what you would have to go through, you would have to like go to your local embassy and they'll have to contact Homeland Security, and it turns into a huge mess if you're trying to fly back into the United States without a valid passport. So for me, I will always say, if you're leaving the country, if you can, and if it's in your budget and everything, I will always recommend getting a passport. I think that makes life way easier. But like I said, check your cruise website to see their policy, because for example, Virgin Voyages, which is like a very popular cruise line right now, everyone wants to try Virgin because it's an all-adult vibe, and it kind of feels a little bit more to all-inclusive because of like some of the specialty dining that's included. But for Virgin, they do not let you travel without a birth certificate. And correct me if I'm in the comments if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they do not let you travel with the birth certificate. You need a passport for Virgin Voyages. So that's why I said make sure that you check your proper documentation with your cruise line. Thing number 2 to know is knowing the full price of your cruise. So when you're planning out financially for your cruise, and this goes to any other trip, I would say take into consideration everything. So what I mean by everything is, if you're flying to your port, don't just look at the cruise fare you have to pay. Think about things like your airfare, your hotel fare if you're traveling the day before, which I'll get back to that tip a little later. And things like Uber, if you're driving to your cruise port, how much does parking cost for those several days? If you're doing excursions, prepaid gratuities, if you want to drink on a cruise and you're not doing a drink package. Taking into consideration all these things, because it sucks when you get on a cruise or you're going anywhere traveling related, and now your funds is getting a little low because things are more expensive than you thought. So definitely know the full price. And also consider, if you know that you're someone, when you're on vacation, you like to party hard as far as drinks, you may even want to consider the drink package included into your cruise fare. So if you are thinking about the drink package, when you're starting your initial research for cruise fares, make sure you take into account that the drinks aren't included, and if you want the drink package, what will be the total cost of even your cruise fare. Tip number 3 is picking the correct spot on the ship. Thankfully, I wasn't plagued with any motion sickness or seasickness, but I do know that that's something that some people worry about. So if you know that you're prone to motion sickness or seasickness, then you really want to make sure that you pick the correct spot on the ship. So what do I mean by that? On a cruise ship, any of the decks or staterooms that are in the middle of the ship, you're going to feel the movement of the boat a lot less. So if you are prone to any sort of motion sickness or seasickness, I would definitely recommend those middle parts. Okay, tip number 4, or a mistake to avoid, is not doing excursions or ship, ship sponsored excursions on a cruise. So when you get to these different ports, the boat drops you off and then you're free to go. Now, unless you're with a private island for one of these boats, so for example, Half Moon Cay or a lot of the big cruise lines have private islands that they own, that they would have like bars or beaches set up for you, and they might have a lot of activities, or stops like Grand Turks has Margaritaville. But sometimes you might get there and have nothing to do. I would really recommend utilizing excursions, at least for a few of your stops. And that's because, especially when you get to these ports and you only have a few hours there, probably like from the morning to like 5 p.m., you really want to make sure that you're able to do some fun things and get a lot out of your time. And booking an excursion will give you something structured to do, and you will have someone that's native to the island or wherever you're at to show you around so you can have a good time. And I really think it can make or break your experience. When you don't do excursions, some people complain about being bored or not knowing what to do, or they get swindled into things that they just book last minute when they're there. So my biggest tip would be to pre-plan some excursions. And the biggest tip out of this is to, when you're first starting off cruising, or even if you're an experienced cruiser, I recommend, even though they're sometimes a bit more pricey, utilizing the excursions through the cruise. Because what will happen is, if you do an excursion that's booked through your cruise line, let's say something goes wrong, the bus, has a flat tire, and then now all of a sudden you're late back to port. If you're on a boat sponsor or a cruise sponsored excursions, the boat has to wait for you, and they'll wait for you until you get back. But if you book through Viator or one of these other excursion places and something goes wrong and you're late back to the cruise, you're late and you're probably going to be watching the cruise blow its horn as it goes away. So I would stick with booking excursion to give you something to do, unless you already know that port and know what to do on your own. Because I've really seen like some people complain about cruise days or port days, and that's because they didn't book excursion. So I would recommend it and book a cruise sponsor excursion, especially when you're a new cruiser. Okay. Tip number 5 is to know what's included. And what I mean by that is, when we first got on the cruise, sometimes we were a little timid to do things because we're like, is that an extra charge? Is that an extra charge? Is this included? How much is that? This and that. So I think doing a little research on your cruise's website ahead of time to know what things are included is a game changer, because then you take some of the second guessing about what experiences you can do that are free and what experiences do you want to spend extra money for. So for example, aboard Carnival cruises, you have things like Guy's Burger on some ship, Guys like the barbecue. I'm forgetting the name. Is it Pig and Ink? I'm forgetting the name of it, but Guys has a barbecue place. You have Blue Iguana. Places like that on a Carnival cruise are free of charge. And all cruises offer a lot of dining options that are actually free. So knowing what's included will take away the guessing work. And also knowing what included will free you from the prison that is the main dining hall. I feel like when we went on our first cruise, and I'm only going on my second cruise this year, but I've done a lot of research, I've traveled a lot, and I feel like when we got on our first cruise back in 2019, I felt like we just went to the main dining hall every night. And that's because we knew that there were other options, but I think we didn't feel like trying to figure out what other options were included. So we just went to the main dining hall. If you explore, research before time, you will know what things are included. And also you won't make the mistake of utilizing things that aren't included. For example, those big bottle of waters that Carnival gives you, not included in your cruise fare, you're gonna pay extra for that. So just knowing these things will help you better manage your budget, know what things you wanna splurge on, but also helps you get right to the fun faster. Okay, my next tip is one of the biggest ones, and I really believe heavy in this, and I know it's probably a debate in the cruise world, but I always recommend, especially for first-time cruisers, to come early the day before you leave, or that your cruise leaves. So, for example, if you have a cruise leaving on a Saturday from Miami and you don't live in Florida, fly into Miami the day before. And I say do that because, like I said, the boat doesn't wait for you. And anything can happen day of, flight delays, even if you're driving to port, flat tires, traffic jams, anything can happen, and the last thing you want to do is spend all that time and money and then you get left by your cruise. So I really recommend going early. That will save you a lot of time and hardship, and plus I always say it's a good time to kind of explore the port city that you're leaving from. So if you aren't from Miami and you're leaving from Miami or Fort Lauderdale or Port Carnival, go the day early and just make a day of it. Extend your vacation by a day. I think it will save you a lot of headaches. And the reason why I put this into my reflection video is that I had a friend and a few of my family members who flew in the day. I went the day early with a few family members. Some family members flew in that day and their flight got delayed. And literally they almost missed the boat. Like when I say almost missed the boat, the minute they texted us and said that they finally made it on board, the horn started going off and we started pulling away. So like literally, and I think the travel agent was able to pull little strings, and I think the delays that happened were pretty big, so it was a lot of people delayed. So I think the Carnival may have gave a little grace with this because travel agents called ahead of time, but do not count on that. They will leave you. They will leave you if you're, and so I always recommend going early. That will save you a lot of time and hardship. And I think my final tip for today, and I'm gonna make more videos in this series, so if you have any questions, you can comment them down below and I'll do it in future videos. But my last tip for today is if you are flying out the day that the cruise gets back to port, so you're, on debarkation, I cannot even say that. Embarkation and, is debarkation? Or am I making up words? Disembarkation? You know what I'm saying. The day you get off, disembarkation, right? Well, anyway, the day you get back and you're leaving the boat, if you're planning on flying home that day, I will always recommend to not book any flights that is, I would say, earlier than 12 noon. You always want to make sure your flights are at least later than 12 noon because you never know what could happen when the boat getting back in. You have tons of people trying to get off the cruise. You might have jams with Uber, so give yourself plenty of time. And if you do have to get a flight that's like for 10 a.m. or 11 a.m., make sure that you're up early. Do not use the feature or the service where they can come and get your bags for you for the night before and take it out for you. No. Take your own bags off the ship because you're going to be waiting forever for those bags to come down if you let Carnival collect your bags the night before, and you can miss your flight. So if you do have to do a really early morning flight, make sure that you take your bags off with you. Don't use the service the night before for them to collect your bags, and make sure you're up bright and early so you can be the first one off that boat. Well guys, that was a few of my mistakes and tips and tricks for first time cruisers. If you like this video, please give me a big like. It really helps out a lot. And consider subscribing. And comment down below any tips you have and any questions you have for the next video. Bye.